The town of Gloomhaven lay shrouded in a perpetual mist that clung to the cobblestone streets like a persistent memory. Its gray buildings, topped with slate roofs, emerged from the fog as if reluctant to reveal themselves fully to the outside world. Few travelers ventured to Gloomhaven by chance, for its reputation was whispered in nearby hamlets with hushed tones and wary glances. On this particularly chilly evening, a solitary figure approached the town on horseback. The steed, a massive black warhorse, seemed as much a shadow as its rider, who was cloaked in a flowing, dark mantle. As they neared the first buildings, a dim light flickered through the mist from the lanterns that hung by the town's boundary. The rider paused, surveying the eerily quiet surroundings. No welcoming voices called out, no curtains twitched. It was as if the town itself held its breath in anticipation or fear. Eryn Vex, the rider, was no ordinary traveler. She was a Hexblade, known and feared for her mastery of both sword and sorcery, her services sought by many who had coin or cause enough to demand her unique skills. But tonight, she came not for gold nor glory, but drawn by rumors of something far darker, an evil said to be ancient and powerful, now stirring in Gloomhaven. Dismounting, Eryn pulled her cloak tighter against the biting wind that slipped through the alleys, carrying whispers of danger and a faint, almost imperceptible chant. The sound seemed to seep from the very stones of Gloomhaven, murmuring a warning. Or was it an invocation? As she tethered her horse to a post near the town's entrance, her keen eyes caught a flicker of movement in a second-story window across the street. A shadow retreated into the darkness of the room it had briefly occupied. Erin's hand went instinctively to the hilt of her blade, her senses sharpening. So it begins, she thought, stepping forward into the embrace of Gloomhaven's shadows. Here, among these veiled streets, her quest would unfold, though whether it would lead to salvation or damnation, none could yet say. But Eryn Vex was no stranger to walking paths bordered by light and shadow, and she would tread this one with her blade ready and her will unbroken. Eryn Vex's boots echoed softly on the cobblestones as she made her way deeper into the heart of Gloomhaven. The mist seemed to thicken with every step, obscuring her vision and dampening the sounds of her approach. The town appeared deserted, the usual signs of life extinguished under the oppressive fog. As she passed under the flickering light of a gas lamp, its glow cast her shadow long and twisted on the ground beside her. Eryn paused, her sharp eyes scanning the rows of closed shops and homes, their windows dark and lifeless. It was uncommon for a town, even one as remote as Gloomhaven, to be so utterly still. Suddenly, a low murmur broke the silence. It was faint, almost inaudible, like a whispered conversation carried on the wind. Erin's gaze narrowed as she traced the sound to a narrow alleyway between two old, timbered buildings. With a quiet swish of her cloak, she approached, her hand resting lightly on the pommel of her sword, ready to draw at the slightest hint of danger. The whispering grew louder as she neared the mouth of the alley. It was not the wind. It was voices, chanting in a language she did not recognize. The tones were rhythmic and unsettling, suggesting a ritual or spell of significant power. Eryn slipped into the shadows at the alley's edge, her presence masked by the dense mist and her dark attire. Peering around the corner, she spotted a small group huddled around a flickering brazier. Their faces were hidden by hooded robes, and their hands were raised as they chanted, the eerie melody twisting like the mist itself. At their center, on a makeshift altar, lay an object shrouded by a black velvet cloth. Even from this distance, Eryn could feel a pulsing energy emanating from it, a dark aura that tugged at the edges of her senses. She withdrew back into the shadows, her mind racing. This was no ordinary gathering. This was a coven of some sort, practitioners of the dark arts, perhaps the very source of the evil that plagued Gloomhaven. The object they revered was undoubtedly connected to the disturbances in town. Eryn knew she had found her first clue, but confronting the group alone without understanding their numbers or power would be foolish. She needed more information, and there was only one place a traveler could hope to find whispers of truth in a town shrouded in secrets: the local tavern. It was time to melt into the fog once more, her path now clear as she headed toward the faint sound of distant chatter, the only sign of life in the ghostly town. The tavern, known as the Shrouded Lantern, sat on the edge of the market square, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light that contrasted starkly with the gloomy streets. Eryn approached cautiously, her senses alert. Even in a place that promised respite and human warmth, dangers could lurk, especially in a town as enigmatic as Gloomhaven. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, Eryn was immediately enveloped by the clamor of voices and the smell of roasted meat and ale. The interior was rustic, with wooden beams overhead and tables scattered haphazardly around a large hearth. Despite the apparent normalcy, Eryn could feel the undercurrent of tension in the room. The patrons' laughter was too loud, their glances too quick and furtive. She chose a secluded corner table with a clear view of the room and the entrance. A burly bartender, noticing her silhouette by the door, nodded in acknowledgement before continuing his work, wiping down glasses with a rag that had seen better days. No sooner had Eryn settled into her seat than a hunched elderly woman approached her. Her back was bent with age, and her eyes were clouded, but there was a sharpness to her gaze that suggested she missed little. "You're not from round here, are you?" the old woman croaked, her voice low but carrying an unmistakable note of curiosity. "Don't often see new faces in Gloomhaven, especially not ones that carry the shadows with them as you do." Eryn studied the woman, noting the keen intelligence hiding behind her weathered facade. "I'm passing through," she replied, her voice neutral. "But I've found more shadows in this town than I anticipated. Perhaps you might shed some light?" The old woman chuckled, a raspy sound like dry leaves being stirred by the wind. "Maybe I can. Maybe I can't. Depends on what kind of shadows you're chasing, Hexblade." Her use of the title was not a question, but a statement, as though she knew exactly who and what Eryn was. "Tell me about the gatherings," Eryn said, cutting straight to the chase, her eyes never leaving the old woman's. "The ones that happened shrouded by night and fog." The elderly lady glanced around the tavern, ensuring their conversation remained private. "Dark things happen in dark times," she murmured, leaning closer. "The Veil-bearers, they call themselves. Meddlers in forbidden arts, seeking to pull down the veil that separates the light from shadow." "And the artifact?" Eryn pressed, her interest piqued. A flicker of fear passed through the old woman's eyes. "Aye, the Heart of Midnight. They've uncovered something terrible, something old. But you ought to be careful, miss. Some things in the dark are best left alone." Eryn's mind raced. The Veil-bearers. The Heart of Midnight. These were the threads she needed to unravel the mystery enveloping Gloomhaven. But caution was necessary. Such names carried weight, and weight could crush the unwary. "Thank you for the warning," Eryn said, her tone sincere. "But shadows are where I thrive." With a knowing look, the old woman nodded slowly, then shuffled away, melting back into the crowd, leaving Eryn to ponder her next move amidst the crackling fire and whispered secrets of the shrouded lantern. After the old woman retreated into the weaving crowd of the tavern, Erin's gaze lingered on the flickering shadows cast by the hearth. Her mind worked quickly, piecing together the fragments of information. The Veil-bearers, a cult-like group with a penchant for the dark arts, and the Heart of Midnight, an artifact of unknown, possibly cataclysmic power. It was evident that her path forward was fraught with peril. Erin's contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of a server, a young woman with wary eyes that glanced briefly at the sword at Erin's side. She placed a mug of ale on the table, her movements hesitant. "Compliments of the house," she murmured before turning to leave. "Wait," Eryn called softly. The server paused, tension in her posture. "I'm looking for information. Maybe you can help me." The server looked around nervously, biting her lip. "I don't know much, just serving drinks, that's all." "It's about the Veil-bearers," Eryn pressed gently, sensing the girl's fear. "Any bit of information could help." The young woman hesitated, then leaned in closer, her voice a whisper. "They meet at the old Gravemire estate at the edge of town, but it's cursed, they say. Bad things happen to those who pry too deeply." "Thank you," Eryn said, sliding a few coins across the table, which the server quickly pocketed before slipping away. Eryn sipped her ale, her thoughts darkening like the storm clouds that often gathered over Gloomhaven. The Gravemire estate. The name sent a chill through her, not from fear, but from the anticipation of confronting whatever lay there. She knew she would need to be well prepared before venturing into such a place, renowned for its dark history and darker happenings. Finishing her drink, Eryn stood, her resolve firming. As she made her way toward the door, a hand grabbed her arm. Startled, she spun, her hand inching towards her blade, only to see Joran, a rugged, middle-aged man known in the tavern for his tales of the old wars. "Eryn Vex," he said, his grip firm but not threatening. "You're going to need help if you're meddling with the Veilbearers." "And why would you help me?" Eryn eyed him suspiciously. Joran's face was etched with lines of sorrow and knowledge. "Because my daughter, she was taken by them. Never returned. I've got nothing left but revenge." Eryn studied him for a moment. Joran's eyes held a pain so palpable it stirred something within her, a shared understanding of loss. "All right, Joran," she finally said, releasing her grip on her weapon. "Let's talk." She gestured to the now empty corner table, where the flickering light of the fire couldn't quite reach, perfect for plotting a path through shadows. Back at the shadowed corner table, Joran's rugged face was lit intermittently by the wavering flames of the hearth. Eryn observed him carefully as he began to speak, his voice low and urgent. "The Gravemire estate has been a blight on Gloomhaven for as long as anyone can remember," Joran explained, his eyes distant. "Used to be a grand place, full of life. Now, it's nothing but ruins, a haven for those who worship the darkness." Eryn listened intently, absorbing every detail. "And the Veilbearers, they've taken it as their stronghold?" "Yes," Joran nodded gravely. "They're drawn to places of power, places where the veil between worlds is thin. Gravemire's always been a place of sorrow and shadows, perfect for their kind." "And your daughter?" Eryn asked, her voice softening slightly. Joran's eyes clouded with pain. "Mara. She was curious, rebellious, found their ideas fascinating. She went to one of their gatherings just to see, she said. Never came back." His voice broke a little. "I've searched, asked questions, threatened, nothing." "I'm sorry, Joran," Eryn said sincerely. "We'll find out what happened to her, together." Joran gave a stiff nod, wiping a rough hand across his eyes. "What's your plan?" he asked, shifting the focus back to the task at hand. "We need to scout the estate first. Understand their numbers, their defenses. If we rush in blindly, we risk everything," Eryn strategized aloud. "Right?" Joran agreed. "There's an old tunnel, part of the town's original fortifications. It runs beneath the estate grounds. Not many know about it. It's mostly collapsed, but there's a way through if you're not afraid of a few shadows and spiders." Eryn smiled faintly. "Shadows and spiders are the least of our worries." They spent the next hour discussing the layout of the estate as Joran remembered it and making a list of supplies they'd need. Rope, torches, and something to deal with possible magical traps. Eryn suggested they prepare some rudimentary wards against dark magic. Precaution that Joran agreed was wise. As they rose from the table, Eryn felt the weight of the impending confrontation. It wasn't just about infiltrating a cult or discovering the secrets they guarded. It was about peering into the depths of human darkness, about rescuing those lost to it, like Mara. "I'll gather what we need. Meet me here at midnight," Eryn instructed, her tone resolute. "Midnight," Joran confirmed, clapping her on the shoulder with newfound respect and determination. Eryn stepped out of the tavern back into the misty evening. The streets of Gloomhaven felt different now, charged with purpose. She looked up at the obscured sky, the stars veiled by the ever-present fog. This town held its secrets close, but she was determined to drag them into the light, no matter what awaited her in the shadows of the Gravemire estate. As the town clock chimed 11, Eryn Vex stood in the shadows of Gloomhaven's narrow alleyways, observing the deserted streets. The mist hung low and thick, swallowing the weak light from the few functioning street lamps. She checked the supplies in her pack one last time. Rope, torches, and small, carefully wrapped bundles of herbs and charms for protection against dark magic. She felt the familiar thrill of impending action, a sensation that had guided much of her life as a Hexblade. Joran joined her shortly, his face set in a grim mask of determination. In his hands, he carried an old, oil-stained lantern that gave off a dim, flickering light, barely piercing the fog. "Everything's set," he whispered, his voice low and urgent. "Good." Eryn replied, adjusting the sword at her side. "The tunnel entrance. You lead the way." They moved silently through the town, avoiding the main streets. Joran led her to a decrepit part of Gloomhaven, where the buildings huddled together, leaning warily against each other as if in mutual support against the weight of years and secrets. At the end of a narrow lane choked with overgrowth, Joran paused and knelt, brushing away ivy to reveal an old metal grate almost completely rusted over. "This is it," he murmured, pulling at the grate with a series of creaks and groans until it swung open, revealing a dark, gaping maw that led downwards into the earth. Eryn peered into the abyss, her senses extending into the darkness. She could feel the cold dampness wafting up, carrying with it the scent of mold and something else, something faintly corrosive like the echo of old magics. Joran handed her the lantern, which she took with a nod, leading the way down into the tunnel. The descent was steep and precarious, the old stone steps worn smooth by centuries of neglect. The air grew cooler as they delved deeper, the silence of the tunnel enveloping them like a thick blanket. After a tense, downward journey, the tunnel leveled out, opening into a wider underground passage. The walls here were lined with remnants of old fortifications, niches that once held torches long since burnt out, and faded murals depicting the town's once proud history. "The estate should be directly above us now," Joran said, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Eryn held the lantern high, casting light on the crumbling walls. "We need to be cautious from here on. This place..." She paused, her gaze catching a faint symbol scratched into the wall, a circle enclosed by a triangle, the mark of ancient forbidden rites. "Dark magic has been used here," she concluded, her tone wary. "We might encounter wards or traps. Stay close." They proceeded with renewed caution, the silence of the underground broken only by the occasional drip of water and their own careful footsteps. As they moved, Eryn felt the oppressive weight of the darkness around them, a darkness tinged with the residue of past horrors and secrets buried deep beneath the earth. The tunnel began to slope upwards, hinting that they were nearing their destination. Erin's hand rested on her sword, ready for whatever they might find as they approached the heart of the Veilbearer's domain. The upward incline of the tunnel grew steeper, and the air became denser with a chilling humidity that clung to Erin's skin. Both Eryn and Joran were alert, their senses strained for any sign of disturbance or danger. Their footsteps, though cautious, echoed slightly in the narrowing passage, announcing their advance despite their efforts at stealth. As they approached what appeared to be the end of the tunnel, Eryn paused, raising her hand to halt Joran. She extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom of the night, slowly adjusted until shapes and shadows began to take form once again. "There," she whispered, pointing towards a faint glimmer of light that seeped through a small crevice in the wall ahead. It was not the natural light of the surface, but a sickly green glow, unnatural and wavering. Joran nodded, understanding the gravity of their discovery. With careful precision, Eryn extracted a small mirror from her pack, using it to peer around the crevice without exposing herself. The reflected image revealed a large, cavernous space beyond the tunnel. It was an underground chamber, lit by phosphorescent fungi that clung to the damp walls, casting an eerie luminescence across the room. Figures moved within the chamber, their shadows grotesque and elongated. "We've found their lair," Eryn murmured, her voice a blend of satisfaction and concern. She slid the mirror back into her pack and considered their options. "We need a closer look, but let's keep out of sight. Follow my lead and stay silent." Navigating around the crevice, they found a narrow ledge that skirted the wall of the chamber. Ducking low, they moved slowly, every sense alert. The conversation among the figures within the chamber became audible, a mix of chants and commands in an arcane language that twisted the air with its darkness. As they edged closer, a sudden outburst of energy pulsed through the room. Eryn and Joran halted, pressing themselves against the cold stone. Peering around, Eryn saw a central figure, cloaked and hooded, raising an arm as if directing the energy. Around him, the others knelt, their faces hidden and voices united in an ominous chant. The central figure spoke, his voice resonant and powerful, cutting through the murmur like a blade. "The veil thins, and our time draws near. The heart of midnight will soon be complete, and the shadows will obey our call." Erin's grip on her sword tightened, the pieces of her quest falling into place with a clarity that chilled her to the bone. The heart of midnight, a dark artifact of great power, was near completion. She needed to act, and soon. Turning slightly, she whispered to Joran, We need to find where they're keeping the artifact. It's key to their plans and our best chance of stopping them. Joran's expression was grim but determined. Lead the way, Hexblade. I'm with you to the end. With a nod, Eryn prepared to delve deeper into the shadows of the Veilbearer's sanctum, the weight of their mission pressing heavily upon her as she moved forward into the dark whispers of fate. Cautiously, Eryn and Joran continued along the narrow ledge, their movements deliberate and silent. The eerie glow from the fungi illuminated the chamber just enough to reveal its vastness and the strange occult symbols etched into the stone walls. These markings pulsed faintly with a dark energy, a visual echo of the sinister activities that transpired here. As they moved, Eryn's mind raced, considering their options. The cultists were deeply engrossed in their ritual, providing her and Joran an opportunity to explore further without immediate detection. She noticed a series of small, tunnel-like passages branching off from the main chamber. Any one of these could lead to the Heart of Midnight or serve as a means to gather more information on the cult's intentions and resources. Pointing to the nearest passage, she signaled to Joran, and without a word, they veered off the ledge and into the shadows of the tunnel. The passage was cramped and damp, the air thick with a musty odor that spoke of long disuse. Moss and other decay formed a slippery carpet underfoot, making their progress slow. After several minutes of tense navigation, the tunnel opened into a smaller secondary chamber. This room was filled with various artifacts and scrolls, a library of the dark arts that the Veilbearers had accumulated. Eryn's eyes widened at the sight of such arcane knowledge, knowing well the power and danger it represented. Joran, meanwhile, was drawn to a series of maps and documents spread across a large table. He scanned them quickly, his fingers tracing lines and symbols that detailed the geographical and mystical landscapes of Gloomhaven and its surroundings. "Look at this," Joran whispered, his voice barely audible. He pointed to a detailed drawing of the Gravemire estate, with specific areas marked in red. They've charted ley lines, old magic hotspots. And here, his finger paused over a specific location in the drawing. This must be where the Heart of Midnight is kept. Eryn joined him, studying the map with a strategic eye. If we can interrupt their ritual, perhaps we can sever their connection to the heart. It could give us the chance to seize it. Their plan was abruptly interrupted by a low, rumbling sound from the way they had come. Instantly on alert, Eryn motioned for Joran to follow her behind a large, draped curtain that concealed them from view. Peeking out, they saw two robed figures enter the chamber, discussing something in hushed, urgent tones. "The energy fluctuations have begun," one of the figures said, a female voice laced with worry. "The heart is unstable. If we don't complete the ritual soon, we could lose control of the shadows." Her companion, a taller, gaunt figure, nodded gravely. "Then we must hasten our efforts. The veil will not wait for us." As the pair moved out of the chamber, Eryn and Joran exchanged a glance. The urgency of their mission had just increased exponentially. Not only did they need to locate and secure the Heart of Midnight, but time was also running out. Eryn led the way out of their hiding spot, her resolve hardened. "We strike now," she declared. "Let's head towards the location marked on the map. It's now or never." With renewed purpose, they left the chamber, making their way deeper into the network of tunnels, guided by the map and driven by a dire need to prevent a catastrophe that could envelop Gloomhaven and beyond. Eryn and Joran hurried through the twisting, underground passages, guided by the crude map they had acquired from the cultists' library. The urgency propelled them forward, each step echoing slightly off the damp stone walls, blending with the distant, ominous chants that resonated through the labyrinth. As they approached the area marked on the map, the air grew colder, and the oppressive darkness seemed to thicken, almost palpable in its intensity. Shadows flickered at the edge of their torchlight, as if mocking their efforts to penetrate the darkness. Eryn's hand gripped her sword hilt tightly, her senses alert to any movement. "Here," Joran whispered, stopping before a heavy, iron-bound door that loomed ominously in the gloom. The door was etched with more of the dark symbols they had seen earlier, each one pulsing with a malevolent energy. Eryn studied the door, recognizing the symbols as part of a warding spell, a potent one. This won't be easy to open. These symbols, they're designed to keep intruders out, or perhaps to keep something in. Joran looked around, his eyes searching the nearby walls. There might be a way to disrupt the spell, he suggested, pointing to a series of smaller symbols that formed a secondary pattern. These smaller runes seem to be linked. We could try breaking the link. Eryn nodded, and together they worked, carefully chiseling away at the smaller runes with tools from Joran's pack. Each strike of metal against stone sent a shiver through the air, the dark energy resisting their efforts. After several tense minutes, the final rune was obscured, and the door's ominous glow dimmed. With a deep breath, Eryn pushed against the wood. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a chamber bathed in a sinister red light. Inside, the heart of midnight was visible at the chamber's center, set upon an ancient altar. It was a crystal, large and multifaceted, its core swirling with a dark mist that pulsed rhythmically, like the heart of some great beast. As they entered, the chamber door slammed shut behind them with an ominous boom, plunging the room into darkness, save for the eerie glow from the crystal. Shadows seemed to swirl and coalesce around them, forming whispering, writhing forms that edged closer with palpable malevolence. "We need to act quickly," Eryn said, her voice steady despite the rising dread. The ritual could complete at any moment. Joran nodded, pulling a series of small silver talismans from his bag. "These should protect us for a while. Let's move." Together, they advanced toward the altar, each step deliberate and cautious as the shadows danced and twisted around them, their whispering growing louder, more urgent. Reaching the altar, Eryn placed her hands on the crystal, feeling the cold, dark energy surge beneath her fingertips. She began to recite an incantation, a counterspell designed to sever the connection between the heart and the veil-bearers. The crystal's pulsing grew more erratic, its glow intensifying. Beside her, Joran arranged the talismans in a protective circle, chanting his own series of protective wards. The room shook slightly, the air thick with the power of colliding magics. As Eryn's chant reached its crescendo, the crystal exploded with light, a blinding flash that filled the chamber. Shadows screamed and recoiled, the dark energy lashing out in a final, desperate attempt to maintain its hold. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the tumult ceased. The light dimmed, the shadows dissipated, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Eryn and Joran stood alone in the quiet, the heart of midnight now a dull, inert stone on the altar. "We did it," Joran breathed, relief washing over his features. Eryn nodded, feeling the weight of their victory and the cost of it. "Let's get this back to the surface. The town needs to know the danger is past, for now." Together, they lifted the heart, carefully wrapping it in cloth to shield its residual energies. As they exited the chamber, Eryn couldn't shake the feeling that while they had won this battle, the war against the darkness was far from over. With the heart of midnight secured and wrapped in layers of protective cloth, Eryn and Joran retraced their steps through the labyrinth of tunnels. The oppressive dread that had cloaked the passageways seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a cautious silence. They moved quickly, aware that the absence of the heart might soon be discovered by the veil-bearers. As they emerged from the underground network, the cool, fresh air of the night was a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere they had endured below. The mist still hung heavy over Gloomhaven, but it felt less menacing now, more a natural phenomenon than a harbinger of dark magic. They made their way back to the Shrouded Lantern, the local tavern that had served as their meeting point. The tavern was quiet at this late hour, with only a few weary patrons lingering over their drinks. The innkeeper, recognizing Eryn and Joran, nodded to them, a silent acknowledgement of their return. Eryn and Joran settled into a secluded corner, the heart of midnight safely stowed beneath the table. Their faces were weary but marked with the satisfaction of their achievement. Joran's eyes, in particular, held a glimmer of hope that had been absent before. "We should inform the town council first thing in the morning," Eryn suggested, her voice low but firm. "They need to understand what was lurking beneath their feet and what might still be out there." Joran agreed, his expression somber. "And my daughter? I need to continue looking for Mara. Tonight's victory, it's given me hope that she might still be out there, maybe needing help just like Gloomhaven did." Eryn placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll find her, Joran. I promise you, we're not done here. Tonight was a big step, but there's more to do. The veil-bearers were entrenched here for a reason. We need to uncover all their secrets."